Good morning. Some of you may have read about the man who jumped off his boat into the ocean. Almost immediately, he felt a huge bump and everything went black. First thought was that a shark had attacked him. But he felt around where he was and there was no sign of teeth. Eventually he realised that he was in the mouth of a whale and the whale was trying to swallow him. He reckoned this was him meeting his end. And as many folk do in these kind of situations, his thoughts went to his family. When I read that story, I immediately thought of the story of Jonah we find in the Bible. Maybe you thought I was actually speaking about Jonah. Jonah had something similar experience. The Bible doesn't talk about whales, but it talks about a large fish. And Jonah ended up alive, but in the stomach of the large fish. And he was there, he thought about how his life had turned out. After 3 days, the fish spat Jonah out on land and he survived. The background to that story was that Jonah disagreed with God. God asked him to do something and Jonah didn't want to do it. He wanted to go his own way. And so he ran away, paid for a boat trip, which eventually put himself, not only himself in danger, but the people who were on the boat trip with him. You see, a major storm came. Jonah realised that he was responsible for this. And he said to the crew, "I'm responsible, throw me overboard and everything will calm down." What a position to get yourself into, being willing to die just because you didn't want to do what God wanted you to do. The crew tried to avoid throwing Jonah overboard. They threw everything that they could over to try and help the situation, but it didn't. So in the end, they did have to resort to throwing Jonah into the sea. And that's when Jonah found himself in the stomach of the big fish. After a time, Jonah called on the Lord. He repented, and the Lord saved him. And as we said, the fish spat him up on ground. The first story I mentioned concerned a man called Michael Packard. He was a normal man doing his normal job. He was a lobsterman. And this seemed to involve scuba diving. And he was in the ocean off Cape Cod in Massachusetts. He wasn't running away from anything. He was just living his normal life. And we found himself in the mouth of that whale. It turned out the whale couldn't swallow him. And it went to the surface and spat him out. Michael's fellow crewmen had been watching for him, watching for the bubbles from his diving equipment. And he saw him and pulled him out of the ocean into the boat. Michael's only injury was a suspected dislocated knee. And even that day he was able to tell reporters his story. Two similar people, similar horrific experiences, but different reasons why these experiences occurred, and different responses to them. How do we react when faced with difficult experiences in life? Michael continued living the life he had been living, doing the job he had done for 40 years despite his wife's misgivings. Grateful that he survived to get on with life as though nothing had happened. Are we able to do this? Or do we allow bad experiences to adversely affect us, continually adversely affect us, and stopping us doing what we should be doing? You see, God allows us to go through difficult times, but He's always with us. Alan emphasised this last week when he was speaking about some of the experiences he had, but he knew God was always with him. That's my experience too. Through my difficult experience, I know God has always been with me. Sometimes going on as though nothing has happened is wrong, because God is trying to tell us something, but maybe we're not listening. We can learn from these experiences. It may allow us to serve Him better. Maybe we can show His love to others that are going through similar situations that we have experienced. But we need to be willing to be available for Him to use. Do we ever consider that maybe our life choices influence our experiences? It's not a comfortable thought. It's far easier to think life is not fair and we are suffering because of that. Oh yeah, we can accept that maybe criminals and people who abuse substances, etc., maybe their life choices affect their experiences. We can understand that. But ours? Surely not. Jonah realised that the storm was a result of his disobedience to God. Have we ever been disobedient to God? If we're honest, we'll admit we have. Some people claim that they've never had a direct command from God to do a specific thing, just as Jonah had. I would suggest, however, that most of us have. Maybe not as major a request as Jonah had, but just as important. Like we suddenly feel we should phone or write or visit somebody. And if we don't, are we ignoring a prompt from God? I certainly have failed on this point a number of times. Have we served the Lord as we should? See, sometimes we see or we hear requests for help in His service, but we leave it to others. We say things like, I don't know enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm too busy with other things. But maybe it was the Lord asking us to get involved. And we are disobedient by turning away and doing our own thing. I think that every one of us is guilty of disobedience from time to time. Do we need to consider if our life choices affect our experiences. Often it's said that nothing happens by chance. We've a God who orders events in life to achieve his purposes. When bad or difficult experiences occur, we should ask, is God wanting me to learn something from this? Does he want me to do something for him? Is he prompting me to change my ways? We need to consider if there's anything in our lives that are not glorifying to him and need to be changed. Are we prepared to turn to the Lord, seek forgiveness, and be willing to follow his instructions? Michael Packard's experience made him think about important things in life. He immediately thought about his family. COVID-19 has made people evaluate their lives and what is really important. And many have changed. Maybe even changed their job or changed where they live because they feel they've been concentrating on things that are not so important. Jonah's experience changed him from one who tried to avoid obeying God to be one who was obedient to God, even although he still had doubts about the task he was being asked to do. What about you and me? Are we open to listening for God in our lives' experiences? Are we prepared to change if necessary, obeying him in whatever way he asks? May God speak to each one of us in the way he needs to this morning. Amen.